Hey, I'm Mara. I fix lighthouses and somehow fell for a girl half my age who came asking about light. Turns out, she was the light. If you love lesbian stories with an age gap, like and subscribe.
The first time I saw her, the old lighthouse threw a band of color across her cheek as if it had chosen her out of everyone in town. I should have been thinking about torque values and glass alignment, not fate. "Is that a third-order Fresnel?" she asked, breathless from the climb. It was, and I was done for. She wore a green beanie and headphones around her neck, a recorder clipped to her belt. Young, but not carelessly so. 27, I would learn, with a way of listening that made people reveal the scenic route instead of the shortcut. I had a palm full of screws, and the number 6 key balanced along my knuckles like a coin trick. I almost dropped both. "I'm Tess," she said. "Morel, Community Radio. Do you have 5 minutes for a story about light?" 5 minutes became what felt like weeks. I keep my keys on a ring with labeled tags: lantern, gallery, door, service, oil room, workshop. The number 6 is for the trap door that sticks, unless you know where to press. I never told Tess where to press. I liked being needed for something that looked like magic, but was just muscle memory and time. For 3 months, I was contracted by the State Historical Society to bring breakwater light back into working order. New bearings, cleaned prisms, repaired stairs, the works. I arrived 2 weeks after my 49th birthday with a truck full of tools, a thermos the size of a toddler, and a decision to sleep better, eat better, and not get attached to any more coastal towns. I had done 32 towers in 15 years. I knew how to leave without being missed. "Say your name and what you do," Tess said the first day, pointing the microphone at my chest. Her hands were small, ringless, sure. "I'm Mara Klein. Lighthouse restoration and preservation. I rebuild what lasted longer than the people who made it." "How'd you start?" "My father made furniture," I said, before I could decide to be less honest. "He taught me that wood remembers every hand it meets. I like structures with long memory." I shifted on the narrow steel catwalk. "Is that too poetic for radio?" She grinned. "Not for me." I did not tell her that by the end of the first week, I had begun to love the way she waited at the base of the tower, tilting her head to read the weather from the color of the sea. The way she peeled oranges with an engineer's precision. The way, when she stood in the lantern room, she did not touch until I told her where it was safe. I kept that love quiet, the way I kept a pencil behind my ear. Small, familiar, forgettable, until needed. "I'll only be a shadow," she said, showing up with coffee, showing up with questions, showing up with a laugh that danced a beat late, as if she weighed joy before declaring it. "You won't even notice me." I noticed everything. Gull Harbor is a place that cooks people in rumors and salt. There are 3 churches, 2 bars, 1 bait shop that sells ginger chews and hand warmers behind the counter, a bookstore with a cat named Fogg, and a diner whose blueberry pancakes could negotiate peace treaties. The breakwater runs like a spine into the gray-green water, and the lighthouse sits at the end like a bright, stubborn thought that hasn't been disproven yet. The first storm hit a week after Tess climbed the stairs with me. The foghorn moaned. The tower shivered like a horse shaking rain from its withers. We were inside the lantern room, kneeling on drop cloths, cleaning the central drum, thin glass prisms that catch and coax light into direction. When lightning cracked over the water, she flinched and grabbed my forearm. "Sorry," she said, letting go, the apology sincere and immediate. "It's fine," I said. Not fine at all. My skin hummed like wire. "You can hold on if you want. until the noise passes. She didn't, but she stayed close. The rain came sideways, and the glass around us became a crystal throat swallowing the storm's voice and returning it in a different key. "Is it okay if I record this?" she asked. "It sounds like a planet being born." "Record away." I listened to her breath in my headphones, the way it steadied when she had a job to do. We passed the microfiber cloth back and forth like a secret. I had been married once, for 7 years, to a woman who wore silk scarves like the air owed her softness. Rhea taught art history at a college 6 towns north of Boston, and she loved the idea of permanence in an abstract way that never left any fingerprints. We married in a backyard with string lights and a tinny speaker that made Etta James sound like she was underwater. We divorced at the top of a stairwell after we realized neither of us was willing to move toward the center more than we already had. She left with the mid-century couch we found on a curb. I kept the chipped blue mug that had been my grandmother's. It lives on my dashboard now, holding screws and luck. When I signed the last paper, I drove to the sea and sat until the sky realized it did not need to impress me to keep me. I tell you this because I am not new to loving women or to leaving places. I tell you because Tess made me coin a third thing I'd never quite managed, staying without becoming a landmark. She was younger than me by 22 years, old enough to know her wants were not rebellious, but chosen. She wore her hair mostly under that beanie, copper threads glinting in sun, and she had a tattoo of a small gull on the inside of her left wrist, the wings the exact shape of her smile when something delighted her and she didn't guard it. "Most people assume radio is easy," she said once, sitting on the gallery stairs while I adjusted the gear housing. "It's not. It's a practice of absence. You can't show anyone what you mean. Only guide their imagination and hope you leave the right outline." "Like restoration," I said. "How so?" I held up a prism, thin, chiseled glass. "I don't make light. I make a place that lets light behave its best." She stared at me like I'd just handed her a warm biscuit. "Can I use that on air?" "You can use everything I say on air," I said, then winced, except the part where I talk to the bolts. "You talk to bolts?" "Only when they refuse to be kinder than a Tuesday." Her laugh came late, then bright. "I'm keeping that line." My heart, unhelpful, put a hand on the nearest beam and held on. There are errands you can't escape in a town like this, no matter how private you are. Merck's Marine Supply had the good rope and the necessary gossip. Helene's Bakery knew whether you had slept well by what you ordered. "2 blueberry muffins and a coffee," Helene said, the third Monday, eyes sharp, flower on her cheek. "For you and the nice radio girl." "She has a name," I said. "I know, Mara. I also know a crush when I see one." I kept my eyes on the tray. "She's 27. Helene dusted powdered sugar over a lemon bar like she was christening it. "And you are?" 49. Pride and full of sense. A good age. She leaned in and tipped her head toward the lighthouse, visible through the bakery window. "You do clean work. Lives look better in good light. But you know this. Light tells the truth. That's why you fix how it moves. Don't take too long to trust it." "Helene," I said, a little too sharp. "Please." She drew back, hands up. "You know where to find me if you want to practice saying things out loud." I brought the muffins to the tower and discovered Tess kneeling with a set of nitrile gloves, 2 enamel bowls, and a bottle of rubbing alcohol. "What are we?" I began. "Coins." She pushed one bowl toward me. There's a tradition in old towers. People tuck coins in the steps. Luck, love, forgetting, promise. I'm cataloging everything we find under the treads before you sand and seal. I want to build a small soundscape out of them. The clinks and the dates and the names you can't quite read. We cleaned quarters from the 80s and dimes so thin they looked like whispers. We found a tarnished penny stamped with a heart and the initials C plus J. In the riser under step 13, I found a nickel pressed against a folded paper circle. Careful with my calloused fingertips, I loosened it from the wood. We opened it together. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman in overalls and a boy on her shoulders, both grinning with their tongues out, both flecked with paint. "My mother," I said, before my thoughts caught up. I recognized the crooked front tooth, the stubborn hair. I recognized the little boy with a plastic hammer. She and my father painted this stairwell a lifetime ago. I didn't know she left a mark. Tess touched the photo with the back of one finger, reverent. "Sometimes," she said, quiet, "I think we can only find our future selves when we take the stairs our parents built." Her voice did the thing. It threaded the needle between earnest and wry. I wanted to tell her the ways I had been trying not to look for my future at all, how I had been content to be a woman in motion, leaving behind fresh paint and good screws and a blue mug rolling in the truck's footwell. Instead, I put the photograph gently in a plastic sleeve and labeled it with neat block letters and the date and the words found by MK and TM, because I needed the initial beside mine. Waiting became a structure in those weeks. Waiting for paint to dry, for epoxy to cure, for Tess to text "on my way," for fog to lift, for my heart to decide whether what it wanted was a lighthouse story, steady beam, rotating, dependable, or a lightning strike, bright once, wreckage to sort after. She came to my rented cottage twice to interview me off-site. The first time, she sat cross-legged on my rug drinking tea that tasted vaguely of ship rope because I'd washed the teapot with the wrong sponge. She wore an oversized sweater and mismatched socks. She asked me about my hands. "Your hands are so specific," she said. "They're always doing exactly what they mean." "It's 49 years of practice," I said. The second time, she brought a Tupperware of ginger cookies and asked if I wanted to hear a rough cut of the first segment. "I called it Salt Lessons," she said, pressing play. She had cut my voice between sounds of the tower, hollow steps, the small bell of a dropped washer, the moan of the foghorn, the soft chime of prisms tapping like water glasses. There is nothing quite like hearing yourself crafted into someone's idea of you. I sat very still on my couch while she watched my face, her own unreadable. "It's good," I said, throat tight. "You made me sound like someone I might like." "You are someone I like," she said, bluntly. Then she shook her head as if she'd heard herself too late. "I mean, I like your work. And you, yes, you're..." She swallowed. "You're not like what I expected." "What did you expect?" "More showmanship, less quiet." "I'll aim to disappoint again next week." She laughed, and then her face softened into something that frightened me, because it was not about admiration or work, but about the way people look when they find a place to set down a heavy bag and rest. "Disappoint me often," she said, playing with the edge of the cookie container. "Please." I cleaned the kitchen for an hour after she left, moving things that did not need moving. I slept in a t-shirt that smelled like sawdust and oranges. We took the ferry to a salvage yard on Espen Island, because I wanted the right brass for the gallery rail sconce, and because I had convinced myself that riding in her rattling Subaru meant nothing but convenience. We drove through rain that played scales on the windshield. She sang, sometimes under her breath, unself-conscious, a song I couldn't place that was probably not for me to understand. At the yard, we wandered among bins of reclaimed things, doorknobs with history baked in, hooks from ships, glass shades crusted with old stories. "Pick one," she said, pointing at a row of battered lantern chimneys, "the one you like and the one you think I'll like." I chose a chimney with a narrow waist and a flared lip and a tiny chip that made its light scatter like laughter. For her, I picked the one with a wide mouth and a thick base. Sturdy, no nonsense, warmed by 100 flames. I wrote the guesses down on a receipt. She chose for me the one with the wide mouth. I chose for her the narrow waist. We got them backward and right at the same time. Driving back, she talked about her father, who owned the butcher shop in town for 30 years and wanted her to take over the register at least, if not the whole thing. She lasted 2 months behind the counter and then fled to a public radio internship 3 states away, where she learned how to cut tape and beg for grant money and hold silence like a useful tool. "He didn't come to my college graduation," she said. Then she shrugged, but the shrug wasn't a dismissal. It was a recognition of a map you've learned by heart. "He came to my grandmother's funeral and asked me to make a recording of the choir for her memorial. We were fine then. My version of fine. We text about the Red Sox. He brings me meat the minute he hears I'm not eating well." "Do you eat well?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the road when I wanted to keep them on her. "I eat whatever Helene feeds me," she said. "So yes." Later, when a van cut us off and I braked hard at a 4-way stop, she reached for my forearm the way she had on Storm Day, a reflex like gravity. She didn't remove her hand for a full block. We talked about nothing. Favorite wrenches, worst cups of coffee. My skin remembered the weight. On the day I banged my head on the gear housing, I swore into my sleeve and tasted rust. It bled more than the scrape merited. I sat on the bottom stair and pressed a folded rag to the cut with the bored patience of someone who has built a life around finding the right pressure. Tess clattered down the steps. "You're bleeding." "Correct," I said, the word heavier than humor. She knelt and peered, her breath banana sweet from the Laffy Taffy Helene. Tucked into the bakery bag like a benediction, she pulled nitrile gloves from a pocket, a tiny bottle of saline from another, a kind of treasure hunt of capable care. "Stay still," she said, voice low and steady, recorder's confidence recalibrated for bodies instead of stories. "Do you have a butterfly bandage?" "Workshop, second drawer, left." I closed my eyes and felt her go and return, her steps hurried but sure. She dabbed, cleaned, pressed, sealed. Her hands were cool. I counted her breaths instead of mine, 4 beats in, 6 beats out. "I'm okay," I said when she stepped back. "I noticed." She peeled her gloves off and looked at my face with a concentration that flirted with audacity. "Do you want a hug?" It was the last question I expected from a woman I'd been practicing not to touch. It was the kindest question in the world. "Yes," I said, before the fear could paint the answer a different color. She folded me into her without ceremony, all honest forearms and warm sweater and that faint scent of oranges and cheap candy. She was smaller than me, but not fragile. I leaned my forehead against her shoulder and let my day arrange itself around that point of contact. She didn't speak until I stepped back on my own. Then, "Better?" "Better," I said, voice rough in a way that reached down into 30 years of not asking. "Thank you." She gave me a nod that landed as an agreement to be patient with each other's edges. "You don't have to do everything alone," she said. "I'm good at alone." "I know." She tilted her head. "I'm good at quiet. I can bring you some if you want." I wanted in a way that made me want to run down the breakwater and drop my love in the sea like a coin. Watch it spin to the bottom and live there among kelp and bottle caps and barnacles where it could not be asked to make a choice. I wanted in a way that felt like tide, inevitable and gentle and dangerous all at once. I kept not telling her. I kept not telling anyone. Helene put extra icing on cinnamon rolls I did not ask for. Merc offered me a discount on rope and winked like we were both lying about something unimportant. Fog the cat at the bookstore wove around my ankles with the fatalism of any creature who lives surrounded by fiction. At night, I lay on my back in the narrow bed in the cottage and let the sound of waves fill the spaces where words might go. Sometimes I texted Rhea out of habit with photos of a railing or a clean lens, and she texted back a good, sturdy compliment, and we both behaved as if friendship had always been the obvious result of our marriage. Rhea knew me. She had loved and stopped loving me. And she still knew me. She would tell me not to be a fool. It was Tessa's idea to climb the tower at night once, to hear it breathe when everything else went quiet. I unlocked the door with the number 6, and we climbed in the dark with the phones in our pockets, trusting our feet to remember the rhythm. Iron, 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 wood. Iron, 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 wood. In the lantern room, we sat in 2 old chairs like queens of some small country. The gallery creaked. The glass ghosted our faces. Out on the breakwater, the sea heaved with the kind of restlessness that does not translate into weather reports. "I've been thinking," she said. "A bad start if you want to keep your heart inside your rib cage. About age. About the way people say it, like a place you arrive at and unpack. Like 40 is here, and you have a view of the river, and 27 is over there with the good coffee shop and the bad landlord." "I have lived in both neighborhoods," I said. The joke didn't land. I could feel her looking at me through the filter of glass and night. "I like you," she said. "Not your work, not your voice on my show. You." I looked at the place where her hands folded in her lap. I didn't move. The entire tower held its breath with me. "Tess," I said, careful. "I am old enough to be a person who knows what she wants," she said, tone soft as fleece and hard as the choices beneath it. "I'm old enough for me." A beat. "Ask me how old I am." "I know how old you are." I let my own smile be late. 27. "Say your age." 49. "Do either of those numbers scare you?" "Yes," I said, because she deserved it. "My number scares me because people will look at me and see a cliché. Yours scares me because people will look at you and see a mistake." "Then we are very considerate of other people's eyes," she said dryly. The wind yawned around the tower. A buoy clanged, small and lonely. I thought of Helene dusting sugar over tart lemons, of coins under risers, of my mother's folded paper in the stair. I thought of Rhea, who would tell me that most of the mistakes she regretted were the ones she didn't make. "I like you too," I said. The words came like the first warm day after a winter you were prepared to live in forever. "I have liked you for a while." She didn't cheer or pounce. She set her hand, palm up, on the arm of her chair and said, "Okay. Do we tell anyone?" We don't have to, I said. We can take our time. We can be quiet, she echoed, relief and something like relief's shadow sharing the bench. When I reached for her hand, we both paused. The pause had weight. It asked, "Are you here of your own will? Will you stop when I say stop? Are you awake? Will you be kind?" Yes, 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 yes. Our fingers met. We breathed, and the breathing sounded like the start of a story you might listen to in bed, someone murmuring in your ear about the way water understands shorelines. We moved our chairs closer. She pressed her forehead to mine. We kissed the way careful people do when they decide caution is not the same as fear. The tower did not fall. The glass did not shatter. The wind made a low, satisfied sound, like a door closing gently overnight. When we leaned into each other, we did not chase any noise but our own. Sometime later, I learned the taste of her shoulder where the sweater fell wide, and I forgot the names of 3 tools I use every day. When we rose to go, our hands were cold and our mouths were not. Morning air, after you have slept very little, has a generosity to it, a stick with its sweetness. The light was a clean sheet. We walked the breakwater with coffee in paper cups, dodging gulls who had figured out how to undo lids. She wore her beanie. I wore pride like it was not new. Your show, I said, when we sat with our backs against the sun-warmed granite halfway to the lighthouse. Conflict of interest? I'll be transparent, she said, if it matters. But mostly, it's a few short segments on a local station, and the part where my voice sounds too fond is probably not the part that will bother anyone. Small towns don't need reasons. Small towns need something to do after dishes, she said, and bumped her shoulder into mine. I don't want to hide, but I don't need to star in anyone else's conversation. How about you? I have never liked being asked to be either invisible or an example, I said. I like being a good worker. I like being someone who leaves a place better than she found it. I like it. I stopped because the word I liked, next, did not have a clause to put it in without making it sound like a vow. I like you. She smiled into her cup. We can start there. We told Helene first because Helene was the kind of woman who would have made you a cake for your secret and sat on her hands so she wouldn't clap. She knocked flour from her palms and studied us for all of 2 seconds before she slid a plate of small lemon tarts across the counter. Icing comes off easier when you don't rub it in, she said to me and to Tess. And sometimes it's worth the mess. She winked and went to fill the cases. No choir, no pamphlets, only pastry and approval. We told no one else, and everyone else found out, as is the way. Merck pointed at the rope I was buying and said, "Get the longer coil." Ms. Dalrymple from the library asked if Tess liked seed cake, and then sent a loaf to the station with a note that said, "Or tea with the engineer." The bait shop owner slid 2 ginger chews into Tess's palm and said, "For the rough water, it smooths out." My phone lit with a text from Rhea. "You look happy in the photo with the cat. Also, you're holding someone's hand off frame." Then, seconds later, "Good. Be brave and be soft. You were designed for both." Tess and I didn't move in together or make a calendar of dates or take anything that might scare us into performing. We learned each other instead. She learned that I fell silent when I worked, not because I was hiding, but because my whole head turned into a workshop with benches and clamps. She learned that I stored my sadness in my shoulders, tight as wire, and that I would let it go if she put her hand on the small of my back and breathed with me. I learned that she couldn't sleep without sound unless she could smell sea air, that she ate the oranges and left the pith like lace on the plate, that she kept a running list of things she loved the way other people keep grocery lists. Today's fog, old fishermen's hands, the long pause before a lighthouse turns. Our first argument was about nothing and therefore about everything. She wanted to walk the breakwater during a stiff wind. I said no because my knee ached and because this time of year the rocks grew a sly green slick that had even the seasoned learning humility. She said I was being careful because I was old. I said she was being reckless because she was young. The words dropped between us like tools we had to pick up or trip over. We went an hour without speaking. Then she sent me a voice memo from the breakwater's quarter mark. I could hear the wind and her feet and her stubbornness. "I'm turning around," she said, and the recording caught the sound of her exhale. "Because I want to be wise before I need to be wise, and because you make it feel like a thing I can choose instead of a rule I'm supposed to obey." I listened to it twice and met her at the bait shop with a thermos of Helene's chicken soup, which we drank from paper cups like saints who were bad at ceremony. We apologized without keeping score. She put her fingers on the scar on my knee and asked for the story, and when I told it, we both said, "Oh," on the same breath and laughed at the small miracle of arriving at the same sound at the same time. The day of the relighting ceremony was clear enough to see the line where the world ended. The town came with toddlers on hips and teenagers with arms crossed too high to be real indifference, and men who had once stood on these rocks and yelled at the sky, and women who had carried lunches and buckets and histories. The mayor said the required words. The state sent a representative who repeated them. Tess stood near the front with her headphones on and her recorder in her hand, each angle of her face familiar to me like the inside of my gloves. I wore a clean shirt and my good boots, the ones that didn't squeak on damp steps. I spoke when they handed me the microphone. Simple things about the people whose hands had held this place steady, about the ways light is not magic, but hard work made elegant, about how our water and our structures were not the same thing, and that both mattered. I did not accidentally confess into the mic. I saved that for later. When I turned the key and the light woke, there was a sound like everyone forgetting to breathe and then remembering together. The beam rolled, searching and finding and searching again. Tess closed her eyes. My chest did that thing. Took in more air than could have fit a few months ago. We walked after the speeches, after the shortbread and coffee, after the photos of toddlers with paper hats. The breakwater at dusk is a lesson in perspective. Things look farther and closer than they are. We went to the end. The lighthouse hummed like a content animal. The glass made shadows of our faces across its stomach. I used to envy places like this, Tess said, leaning over the rail, voice lost underwater and then surfacing close. That they had one job and did it and didn't apologize or explain. And now? I still envy it, she said, and laughed at herself the way she does when she's about to choose better. But I also like the idea of getting to change my job sometimes, to learn new lights if I need them. She paused. Do you think you'll stay? I could have given her a speech about contracts and bids and the way the world does not hand you permission to hope. I could have said what I usually say. I go where I'm needed next. What I said was, I think I am needed here, not by the tower. I knew when I said it that it would cost me something and give me something at once. She turned toward me. The sun was a copper coin on the horizon, sliding into someone's pocket. I thought of the paper in the stair that my mother had left. I thought of the number 6 key on my ring. I thought of how sometimes ritual is just a way of reminding yourself to pay attention. "Okay," she said, the word robust, full of scaffolding. "Okay." She slid her fingers into mine and stood in the place where anyone could see if they chose to look. "I brought something." She pulled a small object from her jacket pocket, a coin I recognized, the nickel with C plus J and the heart. On the other side, under the buffalo, she had taped a tiny piece of paper, new and white. She peeled it back and wrote M plus T and the date, the way a person writes down measurements on a board before they cut. "You sure?" I asked, not about the coin. "Very sure." Her eyes softened in the last of the light. "I'm not a secret keeper by nature," she said, "but I can keep a story safe. I want this one." We slid the coin under the riser at step 13 when no one was looking, because we are sentimental in ways that occasionally embarrass us, and we have decided to be embarrassed together. We pressed the wood until it snugged around what we left. It felt like tucking something in. It felt like a promise in a language that did not need us to get the grammar perfect to understand us. Later, back at my cottage, we set 2 chairs on the small porch and watched our lighthouse throw its shoulder across the water, steady and steady and steady. A woman with a job she has done for a long time and intends to keep doing. Tess put her feet in my lap, and I held her ankles with the sort of proprietary care I didn't know I wanted. "Admit it," she said. "You named the number 6 key." "I did not." "You did," she said, delighted by the imagined scandal. "What is it, Prudence? Old Faithful? Gertrude?" "Patience," I said, finally. She laughed, and the sound landed next to the lemon trees of someone's childhood I have not met, and next to the cramped back seat of a car that had once carried me away from a home I thought would be mine forever, and next to the tower that outlived every argument people have ever had about whether to stay or go. "Patience," she said, approval threaded through her amusement. "Of course." "Do you want to stay?" I asked. "Tonight?" "Longer than tonight." She tucked an arm under her head and looked at me with a gravity that made me want to stand up straighter. "I want to do Tuesdays at your table where the wood remembers, and Wednesdays on my floor where the rug is better for stretching. And Thursdays wherever the lighthouse wants us. I want to build a calendar that doesn't need all the months at once." She took a breath. "Yes, I want to stay." We did, in the ways that matter. It wasn't perfect. We annoyed each other with the stubbornness of our habits. There were mornings when she wanted to record the world before breakfast, and I wanted to fix the world after lunch. There were afternoons when the town remembered to be suspicious of Joy, and I remembered to buy better screws. There were nights when we heard the foghorn, and both of us smiled in the dark without saying why. We told each other about old loves without measuring ourselves against them. We learned the art of leaving a room to breathe and returning before the air cooled too much. We kept our hands active, hers with cables and stories, and the kind of holding that looks uneventful in a photograph but changes the posture of the day. Mine with glass and wood, and the kind of holding that keeps buildings from falling apart. When we touched, we did it with both age and youth, with a respect for the light we were trying to coax into a direction that made sense for us. That's all. That's everything. Sometimes on late walks, people saw us and waved and went back to what they were doing because they had their own lights to tend. Sometimes someone would tilt their head toward the lighthouse and say, teasing, "Looks good up there?" I would say truthfully, "It's a team effort." Tess would bump my hip with hers, and we would continue, step by step, iron wood, toward home.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.